Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10 over here on Clueless Gamers. I'm your host Pete, of course joined in a second by my co-host Brian. As always, guys, we're back. We apologize for a delay. Honestly, we just literally couldn't get the times to sync together. It has been a busy kind of work schedule for the both of us. But we're back for First and 10. We're back to talk about the rest of the NFL playoffs, which will recap a little bit of our thoughts on the divisional round, the conference championships, and of course, maybe in a separate video, we'll do our preview for the Super Bowl because this is really like the second to last show here of the season before we get into off-season content. So with all that being said, Brian, welcome you in. How are you, man? I know you've been busy on your announcing calls out there. If people follow you on Twitter, and you ready to talk some NFL football?
Oh, as always, yeah, a lot of games I've been doing lately for basketball. Just got back tonight from two games. I figured I'm gonna leave on the nice shirt for the recording
Looks
today.
good.
So that combination of being the Super Bowl week, why not, dress for the occasion? So yeah,
Exactly.
let's get into it.
You're outdressing me. I just got the normal t-shirt on here and the comfy clothes. But we're back here. Let's start in the divisional round. We've been gone for a bit. I think our picks have been pretty hit and miss. I know mine have been. I've been in that like 60 percentile kind of range for the playoffs, which is bad. You're in that in the regular season. You're a professional bettor. You're excellent. You're in that in the playoffs. Oh, that is really bad. So it's been a lot of upsets and things we didn't expect. But let's go to a game kicking off. The first one will go in chronological order. The Texans-Ravens, this kind of went exactly the way we thought it was going to. The Ravens ended up winning this game 34-10. Brian, kind of what I expected. You know, the Ravens looked a little shaky early on, a little rusty in the first half, 10-10. The punt return happens for Houston. They come out in the second half. They completely focus, shut down the Texans, 0 points. I mean, offensively, they only scored 3 points for the whole game. And this kind of Ravens offense humming like it has most of the season. Lamar, I would say, by far his best playoff game of his young career, and the Ravens getting the win at home. What did you think of the performance of the Baltimore Ravens? Or if you'd rather talk about the season of the Houston Texans, you can do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, this game, in that first half, it was looking like we definitely could get a game of it. I mean, we had talked about going into that game the possibility of the Ravens showing some rust, given that,
They
they
did.
had the bye and, rested a lot of starters there the last game of the regular season. And in that first half, rust definitely was showing.
Oh, yeah.
I think there were probably a lot of nervous people in that M&T Bank Stadium at the half of that game because things were not going well and the game was tied, and they came out in the second half and really just put the hammer down. I think it started with that first drive of the second half. They went right down the field, got a touchdown. I think that kind of settled everything down, and then they just allowed their defense to go to work. I mean, the Texans did not score an offensive touchdown. The only score came on the punt return. So against that Ravens defense, we knew how tough they were going to be, and for as good of a season as C.J. Stroud had, and he did, and that whole offense, for them, a very successful season, getting to the playoffs, winning the division and winning a round. I mean, that's big to
Absolutely.
even get one win under your belt as they did against the Browns, as an underdog in the game. So, yeah, I mean, Ravens pulled away in the second half, and there wasn't really much to discuss from that point. But I was impressed with how they kind of turned it around from the first half to the second half.
Yeah, you had a situation there where they really got lucky. The Houston Texans missed a 47-yard field goal at the end of the first half. Really could have been leading 13-10 going into the locker room because, of course, that Ravens drive comes out. Lamar got, I think, sacked on 2 of the 3 of the plays, and they punted, and that was pretty much the half. So they were a little bit fortuitous in that way, and I think that kind of gave them a slight bit of momentum. They go in the locker room, they regroup, they got with all the coaches, and they really came out and played kind of a flawless second half. So overall, though, if you're a Texans fan, do not be disappointed of what you saw. This was way ahead of schedule. You were the number 2 overall pick in the draft last season. I mean, to do this is incredible. I think there's a bright future. I talked all off season. I love the hire of D'Amico Ryans and kind of the players they brought in. They've even exceeded my expectations of what I expected of them. I think their future is very bright. And I think quickly, Jacksonville better be a little bit worried because this team might be the top of the AFC South. So we'll have to see what happens with them, the Colts as well. And then the Ravens, we're going to talk about more of them in a second. But in this one, best performance, I think, of Lamar's playoff career so far. Good win, kind of exactly what we expected. Brian, we're going to the next game, the other Saturday night game. This was a little bit unexpected, right? We both picked the Niners to win. They win 24-21 over the Packers. But this game, they honestly, Bryce, should have lost. I mean, they played for large stretches of this game bad, poorly. They were outcoached in some regards. They were certainly outplayed at the quarterback position. And then all of a sudden, a couple things broke their way. Green Bay maybe got a little bit tight, a little bit young. They couldn't make some of the plays that they needed to. Jordan Love a little bit loose with the football there. And, credit to him. Brock Purdy makes kind of that final drive there at the end to get the touchdown. I thought, honestly, impressive throw he had on that drive was the one he fit in right to Ayuk. I thought that was an incredible pass that he had. Great hands by Ayuk. But other than that, I mean, I understand that it wasn't the best weather that night in San Francisco, or that, day to night. It was a little rainy, a little wet. And we've seen this with Purdy where, we look back at the Cleveland game earlier this year. You get a little bit of bad weather, he's not the same guy. I mean, he was bouncing balls, throwing them 10 yards over receivers' heads. This is why I can't fall in love with him yet as a quarterback, because he is very streaky in my mind. One drive, he looks great. He looks like Joe Montana. And the next drive, he looks like he should be out of the league. So, it is a very up and down situation there. I understand it's only his second year, but they sneak out of here with a win. What'd you think of this game? Did you think it was, hey, the Niners, a little bit tight, that looked bad coming out in the first playoff game? Or were you kind of surprised by the Packers, a little bit let down at the end, that they couldn't kind of carry it home?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more the 49ers perspective because I expected them to kind of lay the hammer down and win this game convincingly. And yeah, I mean, you talked about it. The first half, they just were not themselves. They were kind of sloppy, and Purdy wasn't playing well. He can be prone to, the bad interception where sometimes you watch it, it's just like, oh boy, like what was he thinking there? And he had one of those in this game. But yeah, I agree with you. Like the Packers played well enough that you would have thought they should win this game, but kind of just the second half, showed a little bit of their youth and inexperience, which in part, kind of ignited their season, the back half of the regular season into the playoffs. Obviously, their big playoff win in Dallas, but just didn't quite do enough there in the second half. And the 49ers, it's just about too much talent on the offensive side of the ball. I feel like you can only hold them down for long enough, and they did. They did a good job in that first half, but eventually I just felt like the talent of the 49ers won out in the end, and they came out on top.
Yes, I see it a little bit differently. I see it just that the Packers didn't make enough plays on the stretch. I mean, again, another situation, 41-yard field goal. We know the Rams and the Packers have had terrible kicking situations all year, and that was kind of the case of what happened there on that Saturday night. And once that field goal was missed, now the Niners come back and they score that touchdown and they take the lead. You kind of felt it in the building. You were like, all right, instead of this being a 24-all game, or maybe the Niners have even more pressure that they have to score the touchdown just to tie, now we were like, uh-oh, this is a bad spot. Let's see what Jordan Love does in a 2-minute, and he throws a horrific interception there, which kind of ended a great season, especially a great last 10, 12 weeks that he had. He was playing at an extremely high level in the league. Not a good way, not a good taste for the Packers, but overall, I'm impressed by what they did this season. I picked them to make the playoffs. I didn't even think they could win around. To beat Dallas, to have a real shot that I think they should have beat San Francisco. If they took them the number 1 and the number 2 seeds in back-to-back week, I mean, the world would have exploded, like in the football world. That would have been crazy. I think this team, the future is bright. They're the youngest team, I think, in the playoffs in 50 years or something like that, since like the 70s Buffalo Bills. They should be really proud of what they had, because we talked about this early in the season. This was a big year and a big last half of the season for Jordan Love, whether they were going to keep him or not, because like the way his deal is, that they kind of gave him like a tacked on little extension, but they could easily get out of it. This was a make or break kind of situation here, and the way he started off the season wasn't great. I think what you see here is, man, Green Bay might have another franchise quarterback, which is crazy to say.
It is. Yeah, I mean, you would have thought like, okay, you had Favre to Rodgers. That there has to be like a downturn here. Like they can't get 3 in a row, and I don't know if Love is going to be on that level. I mean, odds are he's not, because that those are 2 of the all-time greats. But the reality is, if they get another franchise quarterback out of it, that's more than they could have asked for. love.
And they got a ton of talent here, Brian. I mean, they basically got 5 catching weapons there with the tight ends and the receivers. You got 2 capable backs. I mean, you see what it does to when Aaron Jones is in the lineup, what he does. That offensive line is so good. If that defense, they could just extract more talent out of those first round picks and actually perform to a certain level, this team could really go places. Of course, they ended up firing Joe Barry, their defensive coordinator. So they're hoping it kind of a little bit of a shakeup there. But I came more away from the mistakes of the Packers had it right in their grasp more than being oppressed with San Francisco, because I thought they squeaked out of here with a win.
Yeah, and just quickly to add on the Packers, kind of their outlook going forward, I think it's pretty clear now. Matt LaFleur, he can coach.
Yeah, I'd
You
say
know,
so.
they have long term.
I had my questions, and I definitely think you could look at this and be like, I came into a situation, 2-time MVP, he wins 2 more MVPs. How good is this guy? I think this season was a big deal for him as well. It's a great point. We go over to the Sunday games and start off with the Bucks and the Lions. The Lions winning 31-23. We both picked the Lions. We figured this would go, but this is another sneaky game where the Bucks had a chance to really win this game. And even though it kind of felt inevitable, I thought Baker played pretty well. I thought the way that the Bucks team overall, that defense for a while, the way it contained that Lions offense, and they kind of just they were grinding away, trading punts back and forth, and then all of a sudden that late third quarter, fourth quarter, the Lions 3 touchdowns in a row just rolled off, and that was obviously the clinching point of it all. You can't let this team get momentum and move up and down the field, especially when they're indoors in the dome at home. That place was absolutely crazy. I was impressed with both teams in this game. I think the Bucks, a team that we both said could be one of the worst teams in the league. I think, they shaved a lot of cap this season. I think they're going to re-sign Baker to a pretty friendly QB market deal. They keep some of these players like a Mike Evans or something, draft some guys. I think that they could have something here in a very weak division in the NFC South. And then the Lions, I mean, hey, listen, they stay healthy. They kept Ben Johnson now at offensive coordinator. This could be one of the juggernauts of the NFC. I mean, I think they're on that top 2-3 level in the NFC. So, well, what was kind of your takeaway and your overall thoughts on this divisional round game?
Yeah, I mean, the Lions, I'm impressed watching them, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because I just think the offensive line really kind of sets the pace for their
Oh, yeah.
offense. It's one of the better units in the league, and has allowed Jared Goff, to really flourish in that kind of system. And the weapons that he has, I mean, Amon Ra having the kind of year that he did, Sam Laporta looks like a top tier tight end.
I don't even
I
know
mean,
how he's
had a
playing on that knee. It's crazy.
it was a big surprise when he was in there for the first playoff
Yep.
game, and he scored a touchdown. So and in this game he goes for 9 catches for 65 yards. So I mean he's a big factor. I like the 1-2 punch at running back. I mean this game overall, like you said, the Bucks kind of hung around. I think they kind of left some plays out there. There were a couple Mike Evans drops too on like big
He
plays that
had
could
that a
have been.
lot all season.
Yeah. So I mean, to talk about Evans being a Hall of Famer, might be a little premature. I've seen an awful lot of that because of his, consecutive 1,000 yard
10.
season streak, which is impressive. I'm a high marker for the Hall of Fame. I just always have
Not
been.
many are.
But yeah, a lot of people just want to put basically any good player. Oh yeah, he had a good career, Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
I don't see it that way. But yeah, I mean the Bucks hung around, like you said. Baker played pretty well. I mean, I feel like this is a team that kind of was sort of peaked this year. Like I don't know that I see it continuing for next year. They've got some key free agents
They
that
do.
they have to deal with. You don't even know for sure if Baker's going to be back. I think he would. It seems like he kind of found a home there. But with Todd Bowles and his leadership, like I'm kind of wishy-washy overall on my future outlook with the Bucks. I give him credit for this year, like you said, lackluster division. They certainly exceeded everybody's expectations. I mean, for them to play competitively into the divisional round, I think more than any of their fans could have asked for. And yeah, I mean the Lions never were in a position in this game where it's like, okay, they've definitely got this one. Like it
No.
was close all throughout.
I mean, they have so many weapons. That offense is insane. I mean, Ragnow gets a little bit banged up in the offensive line. They had a couple kind of injuries there, but still gutting it out. What they were doing, Campbell aggressive, Williams, Gibbs, Montgomery, St. Brown, Laporte. I mean, it's even Josh Reynolds. It is crazy the amount of weapons that they have at Jared Goff's disposal. And as a Rams fan, I know you protect Jared Goff. He's a pretty damn good thrower of the football. I think they did exactly what they were expected to do. They were tested in both of their first games. They held up to the fire. They won games at home. And I think the Bucs have a chance just because they are in a pretty terrible division, but they got some key pieces to bring back, and they're going to have to draft as well. But I'm very happy for Baker. Think they should be proud. Another team that should be proud of the season they had, which was very unexpected. Brian, let's go to the final division round game. Maybe the most interesting. Certainly the most talked about.
Yeah.
This was the Bills and the Chiefs. And you know what, Brian? We got a few apologies to make on this one. So the Chiefs won this one 27-24. Listen, I'm a man of my word. I'm a man who can admit when he's wrong, a person who can admit when he's wrong. I picked the Buffalo Bills in this game. I really thought that this, even though they had injuries, this was the time. You have the game up in Buffalo. You lost it to Joe Burrow the year before. You want to get the monkey off your back and beat Patrick Mahomes in the postseason. They don't have a problem in the regular season, but in the postseason, this is it. And they couldn't do it again. Whatever reason you want to say, the kicker at the end, this, that, whatever it is. This team, I think it was a mistake. I'll say it right now. I think it was a mistake to keep Sean McDermott. They need something shaken up here. The definition of insanity, Bri, is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That is exactly what this team keeps doing every season. These little moves of a Ken Dorsey and all this stuff, nothing. It's peanuts. It's nothing. If they want to make postseason success, right? They hung a Super Bowl banner in their practice facility to start the season, all this other stuff. They couldn't beat Burrow, and they have not beaten Mahomes in all these playoff games. I just don't know what you expect to change next year besides, all right, we're going to be healthier. Okay. And health deteriorates as the season goes on. So I came away from this game more disappointed in the Bills than I was in the impressive nature of a champion in the Chiefs, which that's my fault. I should not have underestimated Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and that defense as well. That's my fault that I fell for it again, and I'll totally eat those words, and the Chiefs deserve all the credit.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, through the regular season, we were kind of down on the Chiefs, and rightfully so. I mean, they were not playing well, and now here we are, on an episode where we're going to preview the Super Bowl, and they're representing the AFC.
It's crazy.
It really is. When you think about a year where they really didn't play all that well, and they make the Super Bowl. So what happens in a year where things are like clicking during the regular season? The league is
done. They're done.
That's why it just feels like they're a juggernaut, because this felt like an off year for them. I mean, with this game specifically, I agree with you. It's a letdown for the Bills because of the myriad of mistakes that they made. Some coaching and some player induced, but like the decision to go for that fake punt there at that juncture,
did that not make a smell of desperation? I mean, that was horrible. What a terrible call.
And the thing was, it didn't end up costing them too much because the Chiefs ended up fumbling the ball back to them on that play where the ball was lost. Right, because that's the rule that everybody can't stand when the ball is fumbled through the end zone and it's a turnover and a touchdown. But, other than that, like, yes, there was the missed field goal, which is a very makeable kick that you expect, a pretty reliable kicker to make when inside 50 yards. I mean, it's like, what, a mid-40s yard attempt, and he misses it wide right. Yeah, and it really wasn't even that close.
It wasn't.
But also, like, late in the game, Diggs has a chance to make a big-time play down the field, and the ball right through his hands. I mean, this, for a guy who is supposed to be a big-time playmaker, and he is, but this season was kind of a weird one for Diggs. They started off so hot, and then it just seemed like he was kind of ignored in the offense for so long. And then, he doesn't make a big impact in this game at all. I mean, he's held to 21 yards on 3 catches. That's not going to get it done for a number one receiver in this
Yeah.
kind of game. So, yeah, I just feel like, yes, the Chiefs execute because that's what they do in big games, and they also got some contributions from some unlikely sources like Valdez Scantling
Yeah.
made 2 big plays. Guy was dropping the ball all season. Edwards-Helaire broke off a big run. Like, I felt like that was the difference. The Chiefs got those plays from the lesser guys, and the Bills too many mistakes in big spots, and
That's
that's
what
the
they do.
difference.
I mean, it's just like it's
Yeah,
every time we're in these spots, I expect the Bills to okay, this is their time, and they never can, and they never can. And these teams were very similar, right? They both
yeah,
struggled during the regular season. They had the exact same record, everything. One's a 2 seed, one's a 3 seed, all of that stuff. And at the end of the day, there's something to be said, and we'll talk about it a little bit later here in this podcast about championship pedigree about you have
yeah,
been there and you do it before. And I think I am at fault for this. I definitely think people in the actual media are at fault for this. Every year we take out the human element of it, of being in that spot, of what that means. That those guys know how to act, know what plays to make. It's just intuition. It's their calm. They're cold as ice, especially at the key positions at tight end or at quarterback or any of that stuff. They know exactly what to do. Andy Reid included that in as well. And I thought that call to me for McDermott, especially after they ended up losing the game, that fake punt, I if I that to me is grounds for firing right there. Because it's been a weird season. They've been doing the same thing. He's thrown out all the coordinators, right? He pushed Leslie Frazier out to start the year. You had the whole Ken Dorsey situation. He's kind of run out of people to blame there. And then obviously you had the really weird and terrible story of the analogy he used. Like, it's just been a strange year there, and I just think they've gotten all they can out of this team. I'm not saying Sean McDermott never did anything for this team. He brought the Bills back to prominence, right? He cleaned up that
yeah,
organization. I just don't know if he's the guy to get them over this hump, and I don't think he is. And plays like that, I look at it, and it's like, did we think we were in a Hallmark movie? Like they gave that ball to DeMar Hamlin, and it's like you haven't called this guy's number all season. He's barely played. We obviously know the whole incredible story of what happened in the previous season. That's the play we call. We don't even throw. We don't even do a fake pass play. We're running it from like 7 yards out. What are we doing? Like, and they are lucky. They are lucky that that ball by Hardman was fumbled at the goal line because they scored that touchdown. The game's over right there. And then they got lucky
yeah,
at the end, Bry. People forget. Everyone focuses on Tyler Bass, which, remember, he missed a couple kicks the week before. Everyone focuses on him. What about Josh Allen was running? He fumbled the ball. He was lucky enough to get the ball back, even on that drive, to even have the chance for that field goal. So that's also an element as well, and it just seems like they're never going to get over the Chiefs in this current iteration. Something has to change. It appears it is not going to change for next season. And hey, man, hats off to the Chiefs, man. They continue rolling.
yeah. And the Chiefs, and there's just the AFC as a
It's
whole is
ridiculous.
just loaded. I mean,
Loaded.
everybody's going to be in love with the Chargers going into next year
Yep.
because of Harbaugh, which we'll get to in the coaching news. But there's just so many big time quarterbacks. Now you got CJ Stroud to deal with. I mean, the list goes on in the AFC. Like, it is a brutal conference. That's why, like, looking at it from a Jets perspective, even if they improve, like thinking about all the competition
It's
they've
hard,
got in the
man.
conference,
It's bad.
extremely, extremely.
I mean, you got two other teams in your division that are playoff caliber, and the Bills and the Dolphins, Jags and Colts and Texans are all going to be there. The whole AFC North's viable, and then obviously you have the Chiefs and the Chargers. Definitely going to be interesting. Let's say that they're going to be interesting next
Yeah.
season. So it's a loaded AFC, man. It's crazy that the Chiefs keep doing this year after year. Brian, let's switch over to the conference games. The big stuff, the stuff that just happened about a week ago or so. We'll start with the first game. Surprised that the AFC game was first. It's usually the other way around. But the Chiefs go to the Ravens once again. I think we have some apologies to make. Because, I certainly know I have to. If I picked the Ravens in this game, I once again picked against the Chiefs. That is totally my fault. And the Ravens lose this game 17-10. Really played horrifically. I mean, this was
Yeah.
a terrible. I hate to use the word shameful because at the end of the day, it's just a game of football. But as pitiful as you could play as a number one seed, as dominant as they were, all the records they had at home for an AFC championship, this was horrible. And I think once again, I don't want to keep shying away from that. The Chiefs deserve credit, man. They went in there. The first time Patrick Mahomes has ever been on the road in the playoffs. They won back-to-back games. I get it. But to me, this is more about the Baltimore Ravens. Maybe you'll take the Chiefs' perspective, but the way they played this game, Bry, I was downright shocked. I just thought that all the kind of the yips, getting the monkey off their back last round happened with the Ravens. They knocked the rust off. I thought they were going to come out and it was going to be a close game, but they were going to grind it out. They were going to stick to the run, and they were going to keep the ball away from Patrick Mahomes. They're going to win this game. Well, not only did they get the yips, but they went away from their game plan all season, the number one rush team in the league, and they decided to throw the ball all of a sudden, as much as you would think Patrick Mahomes would throw the ball. And I'm left with so many questions of what happened in this game. I mean, Brian, what was your takeaway of watching the AFC Championship?
Yeah, it was definitely a puzzling performance from the Ravens' perspective. And the way the game started, you're thinking, gosh, this looks like it could be a barn burner of a
Yep.
game, right? Like the Chiefs score that early touchdown, the Ravens on their second drive get the big play to Zay Flowers, who scores. But other than that, the Ravens did nothing
No.
offensively and made some killer mistakes along the way. I mean, we got to get to Zay Flowers in particular
We
because while
will.
yes, he had the only touchdown and he's a very talented player, but I mean this there were a comedy of errors there in the second half when he makes the big play down the field. You think it's going to be kind of a momentum swing and he's called for taunting. You can't do that in an AFC title game. Backs you up 15 yards. Oh, then, okay, you recover from that, make a big play again to Flowers, get to the goal line, lose the football. I mean, that just an absolute killer right there. You score a touchdown, it becomes, what, a 3-point game at that point? You're looking at a potentially very different game.
Yep.
But it was those two plays were enormous. I mean, look, this was not a good game from Lamar
It was
Jackson.
bad.
How many times did we see him throw the ball down the field and it was like 5 yards over the receiver's head? He just was off the mark all game long. Then at the end, he forces a ball in there to Isaiah Likely. There's three defenders surrounding him. I don't care if there was pass interference. There was no way he was going to complete that ball. So that gets picked off. But just the overall game from the Ravens offense, and you mentioned getting away from the running game. That's kind of their bread and butter all
It made
season.
no
I
sense.
get that maybe you want to go a little more pass heavy when you're down, but to just abandon the running game completely, I agree. It didn't make any sense. Lamar didn't make enough plays with his legs, and it just added up to a no-show offensively. Now, part of the credit goes to the Chiefs. I mean, their defense is definitely
It's
legitimate,
great.
but the bottom line is you have the MVP, at quarterback in a playoff in an AFC title game, and he didn't deliver. I mean, that's what it comes down to. There were just far too many bad plays made, and yeah, once again, the Chiefs had their championship medal. It was on display. They made the plays. The Ravens didn't, and away we went.
Well, I think this is what I hinted at when we were talking about in the divisional round. This is what I'm talking about in terms of championship pedigree. The Chiefs didn't score a point in the second half. Nothing. And yet teams are so afraid, no matter how good they did in the regular season, they are so afraid of that number 15. They are so afraid of that Chiefs team that they panic, that they do things that they're not normally doing. You're down going into the half, right? They didn't score, and as you could see that the Chiefs had no momentum on offense at all in the second half, right? Outside of really those two touchdowns that they score on their first, I think, two drives of the game, they didn't really do anything. And yet the Ravens had plenty of time to run the ball, burn the clock, do what you do, and all of a sudden they wanted to become like it was a Peyton Manning offense in Indy or Denver. They're constantly throwing the ball. I mean, The pick that he threw intended for Likely was, I mean, horrible. I mean, I don't even know what he was looking at. But the Zay Flowers one, what I wanted to add to that, it was insult to injury again. Because he literally had the taunting penalty, then he fumbles, then he goes back to the bench, smashes his fist at it, and cuts his finger open. I'm like, what is happening?
Yep.
What are we doing? They completely melted down. It was a pitiful performance. Now, that defense played pretty solid, right? I'm not going to knock them. They didn't have any crazy turnovers or anything. The Chiefs did a great job there, and I think that Ravens team was a little bit reliant on trying to get some turnovers. But I thought overall they played pretty solid. I thought they played pretty good. It's all about this Ravens offense. I don't care how good that Chiefs defense is. At home, you basically can't put up 7 points for the game, which, remember, the 7 points that they scored on that touchdown was kind of a broken play of Lamar making magic and he threw the touchdown. That's the only reason it happened. It's like they forgot to run. They forgot that they had Odell Beckham the entire game until the fourth quarter. Yeah. That made zero sense to me. They're like, besides Zay, that makes sense. They're targeting Nelson Aguilar. Like, what are we doing? I just thought there's a part of me that shouldn't be surprised because the Ravens under Lamar have just had these bad collapses. And I think part of the narrative, and I want to get your take on this before we go to the next game, I don't think it's unfair to say, Brian, we presume he's going to be the MVP, right? We're going to know that in a couple days. 2-time MVP. There's not a lot of guys in the entire history of the NFL that could say that. But also, let's be honest at this point, and that's just at this current time that we're recording this. He's 2-4 in the playoffs, Brian. I mean, you could do all you want in the regular season. It's not just one of these narratives. It's the truth. I mean, you saw it early on in the Texans game. You saw it throughout this entire game. He played nervous. He played scared. He played like not himself that we usually see, just free flowing and everything. That is part of this. And I think that is something to watch going forward. And for me, as unfair as it might be, as much praise as I've given him, he kind of knocks a tick below me in the AFC quarterbacks, especially after this performance.
Yeah, I mean, look, the narrative is out there because, those are the results. Until you win consistently when the games matter the most, you're going to be labeled as a guy who doesn't shine when it matters the most. And the reality is, if he is the top-level player that many believe he is, eventually those wins will come. And, I think he does have the ability where he will eventually win in the playoffs. I think he will. I think, the team has to make some tweaks. Mark Andrews is out there basically at 50%. It's just nice for him to suit up and be there for his team in a game like that. But clearly he wasn't Mark Andrews that we've come to know. Not much of a factor in the game. But yeah, I mean, the narrative is out there. He's got to do better in the playoffs. I agree with you. My last point on the Chiefs, like early in the game when they were executing, like this was the Mahomes to Kelsey show. At times during the regular season.
I was going to ask you, do you think that was Kelsey's best playoff game of his career? Under the circumstances?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. 2 touchdowns. He had double-digit catches. It was a phenomenal game. Yeah, Mahomes was just kind of zoned in on him. There wasn't really, like, Rashee Rice made a bunch of catches, but no real big plays. Yeah. It really was just Kelsey. And I thought a key play, too, that kind of went unnoticed right before the end of the half. They're kind of right on the edge of field goal range where they're probably not quite in Butker's range, and they run a play where it's just a quick basic throw to Kelsey for 5 to 7 yards, makes it a makeable field goal, and they put 3 points on the board. And those are the kind of plays that the Chiefs make, and those are the kind of plays that win games.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. It was a 9-yard pass he had to Kelsey. It set up a closer field goal. It was 3rd and 24. They could have easily packed it in, and they were like, "Hey, let's make this easier on one of the top kickers in the league." And they knew what they were doing. They were playing a possession game. They were playing hey, you're going to turn the ball over, and we're not gonna. And it was 3-0 at the end of the day. I think you have to be really impressive what they did. It was incredible performance. They did all the necessary parts, even in what I think we still both regard as a pretty weak Chief team compared to the other teams that we've seen in the last recent years. Hats off to them again. They're in the Super Bowl. Brian, the final game here for the NFC Championship here for the championship games before we get to the Super Bowl. Lions and Niners, and boy, was this one a good one. I know what I'm
Oh
going to talk
boy.
about. Lions lose this one 34-31 to San Francisco. San Francisco moving on into the Super Bowl there in Las Vegas to meet the Chiefs. There's a lot of things we could talk about here, Bri, but you know where I'm starting. This was an all-time collapse from the Lions. And I've seen some people out there being like, oh, hey, be easy on them. Oh, hey, they should be proud of how far they made. Oh, this, oh, that. Brad Holmes was the GM for the Lions, was very snippy with the media this week. I thought that was a little bit of a weird, bad look about like him going back at reporters for his drafting style and then saying, look how good that's worked out. It was really petty and weird. I mean, coming from the Rams organization, I don't know. I didn't think that was a great look. But you can see between him and Campbell, what this team is. It's a little bit a bunch of meatheads, especially with Campbell. They kind of make some, fly by the pants decisions. And I said on this podcast, and you texted me that night when this game went on, I said, going even back to even before the Dallas and Lions game during the season, I said, Dan Campbell's aggressiveness is going to bite him in the ass at some point. And I don't mean that just as, flip a coin 100 times and eventually has to land on tails. No, none of that. Like, there are certain ways to play football. And this is where I go back to the human element, right? The human element of the Chiefs pedigree. Well, the human element of momentum, of guys believing. Anything you look at in these stupid analytics and statistics that have taken over all sports, they do not, yep. They are math equations. They're awesome on paper. They do not account for the human element. And when you were keep going for these fourth downs, 2 key fourth downs in this game, all you were doing is it's not like, oh, hey, we're up 14. You were giving the Niners just that glimmer of light through the door crack that, hey, we can turn this around. That is not what needed to be done. You have a makeable field goal, up 14, to go up 17. You put that nail in the coffin. You step on their throat, and that is it. Do not give them hope. And I thought it was really poor coaching. I mean, we know how great of a coach Kyle Shanahan is. I thought he thoroughly got out-coached in the first half against not a great Lions defense. That second half happens. Dan Campbell, I don't care what anyone said on the internet. I've read it all week. Dan Campbell lost this game for this team. He lost this game for this team with those calls. And if you want to throw a little bit of it of just some luck in there, if you want to also throw the offense of the Lions kind of stalling a little bit in the second half, if you want to say not the entire thing is Dan Campbell's fault, sure, I'll make it 75%. But those calls I thought were terrible, and I saw a lot of people trying to downplay that they felt bad for Campbell. He said it in his post-game presser. He said, oh, yeah, I just told the guys, like, I'll be honest with you, we might never get back here, right? He said that to them. That's from his own words. It is very, very difficult to get back to a position like that when you were up 14, almost 17 on the number 1 seed with a chance to go to your first Super Bowl in franchise history. That's a part of it too, Bri. That's the part of it. There is no championship pedigree throughout this entire organization. Them and the Browns, and even you could throw the Jets in there. These are loser organizations. And that matters in these moments. And it turns out one of the greatest organizations in sports in the Niners, they do it again.
Yeah, look, I'm in full agreement with you on the blown calls. I mean, I've seen, some analysts try to defend the Lions calls and saying, well, on the first one, when they went for the 4th and 2, basically should have had it converted if not for the Josh Reynolds drop. Well, I don't want to put it in that position. I'm with you. Like, you have a chance to go up by 3 scores on the road. You got to do it. I don't care what the analytics say, because here's the thing about the analytics. Every time they flash that graphic, when have you ever seen the analytics say, oh, you know what, they should punt here or kick the field goal? The analytics want you to go for it every time.
Right.
So it just seems like it never changes. And then the second one, where you've got a field goal to tie the game, that's going to be like inside a 50-yard attempt. Now, is it an absolute give me? No. But in that point of the game, to tie the NFC title game, you gotta kick the field goal there. I mean, to me, that's just not even a choice. Like he let the team down with how big of a lead they had in that first half, and they're running the ball. Josh Reynolds is taking an end around for a touchdown. They get what 3 rushing
Yeah,
scores,
they
and
were
Gibbs in
rolling.
the end zone. Montgomery absolutely rolling, had everything going, and then the mistakes, not converting on the fourth down, and the Niners, like you said, part of it luck, especially on the play that everyone
The
points to,
Ayuk
where
play.
it
Oh
goes
god.
off the defender, yeah, and Ayuk catches it, and they punch it into the end zone. But you can't put yourself in a position to allow that to happen by just going for it when you're not supposed to. And here's the thing too, because I feel like they kind of sent mixed messages. At the end of the first half, they decide to kick the field goal on the fourth down. That was a spot where I'm like, knowing the Lions, they're probably going to go for it
Yep.
here. And I thought, wow, sound decision there. Kick the field goal,
I
take
was
the
proud of them
points.
too.
Right. But then they didn't learn from it in the second half. They went back to their old ways, which I get. That's the way they play. They're aggressive, but the situation changes in the playoffs, and you got to adjust. You can't just be so stubborn and say this is the only way we play, and we're not going to make any changes. And clearly, it bit them in a big
Yeah,
way.
the one narrative that really aggravated me from the media was, oh, well, you can't fault Dan Campbell for this because they played aggressive all year. It's what got them there. So shouldn't they keep it continuing? We've never heard of situational awareness. We've never heard of adjusting kind of our philosophies given what is happening before us. You see the way the game is going. You know the magnitude of the game. You are not at home. Okay, maybe if you're at home, I go, all right, maybe you try at least one of them. You're on the road in San Francisco with a great crowd environment they had. You do not go for it in that situation. And then look at it. Just look at I understand people don't believe in the football gods and all that stuff. But look at how it happens. They could have been up 17. They turn the ball over. Then that Ayuk play happens the next time on the next drive that the Niners had. 51 yards on the field. It should have been picked. It hits off the Lions, defender's face mask, goes right to Ayuk. Of course, he's right there. Something I would be screaming at as a Rams fan because that always happens with the Niners. And they get that play. Lions come out again, and what happens, Bry? 2 plays in, Gibbs fumbles it. The whole momentum of the game was gone. Like as soon as Gibbs fumbled, they went, the Lions lose. I didn't. They were still down, and I said, game's over, because right there, I was like, you could. The entire momentum was like that. You gave it up on fourth down. They got a miracle kind of play for a touchdown, and then scored on a couple plays later on the touchdown, and then a fumble happens. I went, yep, the game's over. That's it. And that is what I'm talking about. And I just think, I'm not trying to like just lambast the Lions. They should be very proud of where they got to. NFC Championship only, the second time in their franchise history. I'm not saying that, but I was just disappointed because I was like, oh, this is going to be an awesome story. They're going to get to the Super Bowl. They're right here. Obviously, I do not like the Niners as well, so I was also excited for that. And to just watch it slip away in what I regard it is one of the all-time choke jobs I could think in the last 10, 15 years. I think if you're a Lions fan, you got to be sick. I mean, they scored no points in the second half. That 7 points they scored at the end, that was garbage. I mean, that was garbage time. The game was over. They had no chance to come back. The chances now in the new NFL of getting an onside kick are, you want to talk about statistics, that's where you talk about it. The lowest amount you can ever think of. They basically got shut out. They did nothing, and hey, the Niners are another Super Bowl.
Right, and then right on the onside kick, they touch the ball before it goes 10 yards, and that was the end of that.
And you could see too, they were getting rowdy, it was getting chippy. Like they could feel it. They were getting tight. They knew the game was slipping away. And I'm sure if some players come out, you're gonna hear some stuff about that. And then on the Niners side, just quickly, I mean, they made plays. They're key guys. They do what they got to do. I thought once again, Purdy looked horrible in the first half. I thought he was downright bad. Credit to him. His mobility, the
Yeah.
scrambling. I thought that second half he played was maybe the best of his career. Given the circumstances, I understand the Lions' defense is not all time or anything else. They're pretty bad. But still, I was very impressed with the way he played in the second half. Just this Niners team so far in their first 2 playoff games has been very up and down against teams that I think they are better than. So I'm very interested
Yeah.
to see what we talk about here when we get to the Super Bowl picks.
Yeah.
Any other final thoughts on the championship games for you, Bry?
Well, I mean, I think we covered it mostly. Like, I agree. Purdy in the second half kind of shook off the first half rust. I mean, the 49ers looked like they were dead to rights in the game, and Purdy really did put it together. I mean, made some big time throws, and definitely the difference making plays with his legs. Like when he took off and ran, it was like, oh wow, he can do
I
that
know, right?
too. I think it almost caught everybody off guard, but it ended up being a big key in the comeback as well.
All right, guys. Before we get to the Super Bowl thing, which I might make that into a separate kind of video clip. So, but I wanted to at least end this part of kind of what wraps up the whole playoffs with a little bit of coaching carousel. We're not going to cover everything here, not because we can't talk about it at length or we're not educated on it, but we just don't have the time to do it. There's been an absurd amount of coordinator moves, more than I think I've ever seen in the last 5 years. I mean, it's been insane. Just as a Rams fan, as a homer, congrats to Shula there, young Shula getting promoted there to Rams DC in the organization. Of course, also related to the great Don. So that was awesome to see. Really excited to see what he does. Very weird that we internally promoted on defense. We usually get someone from outside the organization, so I'm excited to see that. There was me joking around a little bit. I was like, oh, what if we get Bill Belichick? But we knew that was never going to happen. But still excited for to see what the young Shula man has to do. Bright, I'm going to read you some of the head coaching hires, and you pick out one, what you think is the most interesting. I mean, I think we know one of them that we're talking about. The Chargers, they get Jim Harbaugh,
Yeah.
right? Kind of the big fish in the pond. He finally leaves Michigan. He did what he wanted to do. He wins a national championship, and he always wanted to come back to the NFL. He's extensively talked about that now the last couple of weeks in these interviews. We could talk about that in a second. Commanders get Dan Quinn. Kind of looked like it was going to be Ben Johnson for a while. Then there's mixed reports of what happened there. We don't have to talk about that, but he goes back to the Lions. They get Dan Quinn. Falcons get Raheem Morris. Congratulations to Raheem. Obviously, Rams D coordinator the last couple of years. Won a Super Bowl with us. Very happy to see him get another shot. They need a quarterback over there in Atlanta. Dave Canales, Bucks basically OC. He goes to the Panthers. What do you expect out of him, right? First time head
Yeah,
coach. He
right.
barely was a coordinator. The Panthers are terrible. I have no idea what to expect there. Gerard Mayo, he got internally promoted a while ago from the Patriots, who was basically in his contract when Bill was, they parted ways. He was fired. Let's just be honest. Antonio Pierce got the interim tag, of course, removed. We talked about that in Las Vegas. Titans hire Brian Callahan, coming over there from the
Yeah.
Bengals OC, coming over, bringing an offensive head coach after Mike Vrabel was fired. I also saw a cool thing this week. I think it was the Browns. Kevin Stefanski talked about that they let his dad out of his contract. He was the offensive line coach, I believe, for the Browns, so he could go join his son in Tennessee. I thought that was a little bit of a fun story there as well. Mike McDonald, the Ravens DC, young hot candidate, had a great number one defense in the league. Some of those all-time kind of statistics. He gets hired by the Seattle Seahawks. So, Bry, a lot of first-time head coaches, couple recycled guys there, and 5 out of the 8 defensive coaches, which is not something you normally see these days. I'll do this because we'll talk about it in a second. Aside from Jim Harbaugh, which one of those other ones stands out to you?
Well, before I get to one of those names that stands out, to me, you got to start. The biggest takeaway for me is Bill Belichick did not get a job.
Yeah.
And that comes as somewhat of a surprise, especially, when you hear that he's deep into the process with Atlanta. Like when you see
Yeah.
he's got to his second interview with the Falcons, you think, okay, they're hiring Bill Belichick. So when it came out, oh no, they're going with Raheem Morris, that kind of, set off some alarm bells, I would
Yeah.
say. I understand, you know, the rationale with Belichick that you're obviously be bringing in a very demanding coach who's going to want full control, and that may be something that some owners kind of are shying away from at this point. Plus, the track record lately, as we know, has not been great. But I still would have had to believe that I thought he would get a job, and
Yeah.
I mean, I still kind of think he will maybe the next cycle. If he gets passed over again, then you might say, well, I guess his
He's
time
done.
is done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but as far as one guy that I'd pick out, I mean, I'm not crazy about the Dan Quinn hire with Washington.
Yeah.
Coming off a very lackluster playoff game, and I know that's not the full body of work, and the Cowboys defense definitely, had some big moments with Quinn coordinating, but the first go round as a head coach wasn't exactly great. I mean, he did get to a Super Bowl in Atlanta, but we know how that ended up. I just feel like Washington is kind of in this endless cycle where they just continue to search, and I don't think Quinn is going to be the guy that gets them turned around. So I just
That's
felt
fair.
like Ben Johnson, there would have been a lot more of an upside. Now, like you said, there were reports that came out that he may have been too high with his demands, which seems kind of crazy that a guy would be asking for, a $10 million contract as a first time head coach. But he's, one of these hot coordinator names. I felt like that would have been kind of the sexier hire for Washington than to go with kind of a recycled Dan Quinn. So that's kind of my first takeaway. We'll see what you think about that.
Yeah, on the Brian, kind of Johnson thing. I mean, we don't really know what happened there. I mean, like there is reports that it was about money. Then there's reports that it was not about money. He just really wanted to go back to the Lions to kind of run it back again, and maybe he just didn't like the kind of Washington situation. They were in mid-flight to go meet him, and then he pulled out, and they said it was unprofessional. I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth there. The Dan Quinn one, yeah, I guess you're kind of looking for a culture setter. I mean, Josh Harris, the new owner there in Washington, you got a lot to clean up in terms of reputation over the last 20 years now. When Dan Snyder, the former owner, was kind of doing that, so maybe that's the idea. They spent a lot of money on Cliff Kingsbury to bring him in as the OC. Um, of course, that meant also Eric Bieniemy on the street right now has no job, which is another one of those. That Vrabel, like all these guys, just not even getting a chance at kind of the head coaching spot. I thought was interesting. I did want to say before I gave kind of my thoughts on one of these guys, the Vrabel report. Did you see that came out in the last couple of days where they suggested, I think it was Diana Rossini suggested that she talked to a couple people at the Senior Bowl, and one of, not all of it, but one of the elements that a GM talked about is, they might not hire Vrabel because he's a big guy, he's an intimidating presence, and that might scare a GM to have him in the building. So that's like one of the reasons why. I mean, I thought that was crazy. I mean, this is football. This is a man sport. We're talking about a guy that's won Super Bowls. We're going to be afraid of him, what, bullying you? I mean, what are we talking about? So I thought that was a really weird red flag that's like, did he do stuff in the Titans organization that would warrant that? Or is this just guys just making assumptions?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see that report. I mean, so I'm just going by what you shared there, and it seems kind of crazy to me. I mean, the guy
It
has
was
been
weird.
very successful as a head coach. He's gotten that team, the Titans, that is, to the playoffs on a few occasions. We know he had an outstanding career as a player. I think the guy is a heck of a coach. I mean, whoever is citing that, I don't think would have hired the likes of Bill Parcells, Vince Lombardi going back years ago. I mean, this just in, football coaches, they can be intense. So, I mean, I don't think we should be afraid of people, in the football industry. So yeah, that seems a bit far
Yeah,
fetched to me.
when you go to bed tonight, you got to read that story. I believe it's free online. It is just, what are we doing? The other one that kind of strikes me. I mean, there's all interesting things that we could say out of these, but the one that I'm genuinely fascinated in is the Antonio Pierce situation. And the only reason that is, I know we've talked about it a little bit, is because I just don't know how well this is going to work. And it's nothing against Antonio Pierce, but he's a defensive head coach. He's a first time head coach. We know when teams give a coach an interim tag, especially when they removed a coach, in this case it was Josh McDaniels, that the team despises. They hate him. They hated Josh McDaniels. We know there's going to be a
Yeah.
bump in play, a bump in productivity, a little bit of renewed energy. Now, coming into a full year, you're in a division with Jim Harbaugh. You're in a division with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. You still got, I don't know who Sean Payton is going to bring in a quarterback, but it is still Sean Payton. I think they're easily going to be last, and they don't really have a quarterback. They only have a couple key pieces. I just don't know how much of a a quote unquote sexy move or smart move that is. And I know Max Crosby threatened, he wanted to be traded if they didn't hire him. You cannot give in to the demands of players. And if there's a chance that they were rumored to Jim Harbaugh or one of these guys, you got to go get that guy. So that one, I wish Pierce the best. I think he seems like a great guy. We praised him during the season when he came in, but I just think that one right there has like a 1 year, 1.5 year wonder in my mind written all over it in Vegas.
I could see that because, as you lined up the coaches there, it almost feels like a case of one of these guys is not like the
Yeah.
others. I mean, when you name the other three, you got Super Bowl winner, multiple times Super Bowl winner, and a guy who's been to the Super Bowl and just won a college national title.
Yep.
So you got, I mean, pedigree all over the place with the
Yikes.
other three coaches. And you got another guy who took over mid-season, had some decent games, but also had that, 3-0 game at home against the
Right.
Vikings where you get
What was
shut
that?
out. So, yeah, I mean, definitely questionable. I'm with you there, and definitely up against it considering the other coaching talent that he's going to be going against.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that. What are we going to bring back Aiden O'Connell? Like, what is the move there? I have no idea. And of course, Bry, we got to talk about the big fish in the pond, Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, as I said at the top, gets hired there in Los Angeles. He's the now Chargers head coach. I thought this was not only the best candidate out of the head coaches in the cycle, but the Chargers needed this, Brian. We have talked at length. We're not the only ones, obviously, online. But we have talked at length about the Chargers are going to Charger. They always have this air, this stink around them of always blowing games, not doing enough, making bad moves in transactions, all this stuff. They've been labeled as cheap. All of these things. They needed this as a culture changer, as an image changer, a PR situation, and a guy who legitimately has played well, has won, has turned programs around every single place he has gone from college to the pros. This is an excellent hire. Now, of course, they have a ton of work to do. I think this Chargers roster is not that good. So there is a lot of work to do. I'm not saying that this team is going to threaten for the Super Bowl, never mind the playoffs next season. But I like this. And in a direction where we're going to commit to this guy for 4, 5, 6 years, I love that. I love this move. I love it for Justin Herbert. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great fit. He had also coached in college in San Diego too before,
Stanford.
the 49ers and Stanford. I mean, he's been a lot of different places. The guy is a big time proven head coach. Quite frankly, when he was with San Francisco, I thought he was going to be there for 10 to 15 years.
Yep.
I mean, those teams were just terrific
He
teams, and
wore
it
them
was
out
a
in the building, too.
shocker to me. Yeah, right. He just seemed like he wore out his welcome. Like those last couple of years, it didn't work out, and off he went. But yeah, I mean, the guy is a terrific head coach. I will say that while everybody loves Justin Herbert and we love his talent, we've talked a lot about it.
We have.
We got to see him play better football.
We
Like
do.
he has a lot to prove after this year, and I know part of it, the coaching not up to snuff, Brandon Staley and all that, but watching Herbert up close, like there were a lot of plays that were missed, and he's got to play better. I don't think it's just a slam dunk that he is, an elite quarterback. Like I still think he has a
Okay.
lot to prove, and Harbaugh should be the right guy to get him to that level because look how he turned around a career like Alex Smith. I mean, he was
Yep.
just, in the wilderness the first few years of his career and got him to being more than a competent player at the position. So now you get a guy with, gosh, 5 times the talent of Alex Smith. The potential to do big things is definitely there. So I agree. I think it'll be a process. Like, I don't think the first year all of a sudden you see a tremendous difference, but as time goes on, he puts his imprint on this team. He'll make them a winner in time.
Yeah, I think it's fun that him and his brother are both in the AFC conference. I think that's interesting. I think Herbert, we have been in lockstep on this podcast, you and I, about saying Herbert's got to play better. I mean, he has to. Now, his receivers also have to catch the ball. That's also part of it as well. But this team has to play better. They're going to have to nail a couple drafts. They're going to have to make some serious offseason decisions on some of these guys, some of these high-priced guys they're probably going to have to trade. whether that's Bosa or Mack, or see what happens with Allen or Williams. Eckler's probably not coming back. They're going to have a lot of moving parts on this team. So it's going to be a little bit of a rebuild. It's not going to be a instant kind of mix there of playoff success, but I think they're in the right direction. And this was a much, much needed hire for a franchise that has basically no fans and no history of anything good. So I'm excited to see that there in Los Angeles for the Chargers. But guys, that kind of wraps us up here for this podcast. We're going to do a kind of short little, probably, 15-minute thing maybe of the Super Bowl picks here. So we'll be back in a quick second here. So, of course, like this video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you'd be so kind. Follow us on Twitter and all that stuff. All the links and timestamps are down below in the description. And until next time, which is in like 3 seconds, thanks for watching.